Brace up, Cayman. LTS Radio is live on 94.9 Bob FM.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Sports Radio, brought to you by our new partners at Flow. Did I mention you should order the NFL ticket? If you do, you get to come party with us at the King's Head, free 1981 and food. We're giving away 2 tickets to the Miami Dolphins home game versus the Eagles on December 1st. Just now, order the NFL ticket, guys. That's all you got to do, $129. That's all you got to do. Just watch football. That's all I ask. I'm a sports guy. I like sports. All right. Joining us now live in the studio, Cayman Islands National Men's Football Head Coach Ben Pugh and 19-year-old left back who made his debut Tuesday in Cayman's 1-0 win versus St. Martin. It's Ben Pugh and Jabari Campbell. Good morning, Coach. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah, very well. How are you?
Good. And Jabari, they call him the silent assassin. We're going to see if we can get a little chatter out of him. Swing it over, Coach. I want to say, and he's, like I said, he's our graphic designer extraordinaire, Rochelle's brother. So I'm going to treat him with extra care, Rochelle. What's up, Jabari?
Morning.
And you're also an academy guy, yes? And you recently played out over the summer in the Olympic qualifiers for the under-23s versus Haiti.
Yeah,
so there you are. So you're moving up the football ladder here in Cayman, yes?
Yep.
All right, so tell me a little bit. We'll start with you. Coach, we'll go back to you for the game shortly. I want you to use your nice, big broadcasting voice. Just pretend like you're trying to run away from Rochelle, okay? So what did it mean to you to finally, obviously I'm assuming you've been playing football all your life here in Cayman. And you finally made your debut on the national team, the men's senior national team. This is the same team that shares the field with the likes of the United States, Canada, Barbados. What did it mean to finally get the call from Coach to say that you were going to play on this team?
Yeah, it was a very proud moment for me and my family. I still don't really think it happened, but
I was there. It did happen, so don't worry. All right. So let me ask you, 1-0. After the team, now you didn't travel with the team last Saturday to St. Martin when Cayman suffered their first loss, 3-0, but you played the home game at left back. What did you think of the competition? Your highest competition yet, or how did you? It was 1-0. Obviously, Michael Martin late in the second, tackled by the keeper, and then Jonah Ebanks, your teammate from Academy, converts on the penalty. That's all you guys needed. How do you feel the team played? Tell me a little bit about the game.
yeah, I think we played okay. Out of possession, we were good, and in possession, we could do better, but there's always room for improvement. So, and yeah, it was a very tough game. We fought and grinded out to the end, and that's what gave us the win, I think.
And what was the biggest difference between the under-23 qualifiers versus Haiti and playing against the St. Martin's men's team for you personally?
From what it looked like, it was more physical, and I think both teams gave their heart out and for the country, but yeah.
Good stuff. All right, Coach, we'll go to you. So last Saturday, you guys lose 3-0, 3 second-half goals, a triple actually for St. Martin, and then you come back and you grind out a pretty tough game in front of a pretty good crowd there. We almost had a full grandstand on the one side, and you had a cluster 30, 40 people. And what did you think of the team's performance? Obviously, we've talked at length on this show about the transformation of this roster. Some of the older players needing a break mentally and physically, giving an opportunity to players like Jabari and other young players coming up through the under-23 pipe. And, one of the veterans, Michael Martin, of course, who's had a great Nations League thus far, creates, gets in the box, tackled in the box, and Jonah, another player you're very familiar with, who scores again on the penalty. What did you think of the game overall?
Yeah, so firstly, we weren't happy with how we played in St. Martin. We certainly did a lot of work, and we spoke in length about this game on things we wanted to change. We watched the game back. We watched our other performances back on what we'd done well in previous games, and we went into this game with a really firm idea of how we wanted to play. So out of possession, we tried to be very well organised. We tried to allow them to have the ball in their defensive third. And then we looked to counter-attack, and I said to restrict them as much as possible. And I thought we did that reasonably well. I still think we should have showed slightly more quality in possession. We gave it away still too often. But like I said, we restricted them to, I think, one real chance, where they had a kind of a half chance, a shot which Albertini saved. But other than that, we looked quite comfortable, and we created a number of chances. And really pleased with how the players bounced back, the resilience we showed, the fight and the mentality. And again, I think we're in a good place. I think actually losing the first game against them kind of grounded us a little bit because, like I said, sometimes you can become a little bit overconfident because all of a sudden we win 2 games. And I think that in the long term, like I said, that will be beneficial because now it grounds us and we know that it's still in our hands. And if we do win the next 2 games, then we qualify. So we know what we have to do and we'll do everything that we can to do that, even though we know it will be a tough opportunity.
Yeah, pardon me, absolutely. The next 2 games are, of course, crucial. You've already beaten USVI 2-0. You will get them again next month, November 16th at home. So obviously home field advantage is important. And then you will travel to Barbados 3 days later on the 19th versus Barbados. And you beat them 3-2, of course. A team that was many, many ranking points ahead of you in the FIFA World Rankings. But, of course, you guys have gone from 204 to 193. So you've gone up 11 rankings since that win. It's been quite a journey. We talked about the roster turnover. Tell me about over this last 2 games, what you've done with the roster. Of course, the big name Albertini, who got his first clean sheet in this series, and now he seems to be the goalkeeper of choice, replacing the captain Ramon Sealy, who's rehabbing from a torn ACL, MCL, and meniscus. What are some of the biggest changes that you've noticed and that you've made in adjusting to what looks like not a changing of the guard, but there's a youth movement happening, and it looks like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's a meritocracy-based team now. You show up to practice, you work hard, you get an opportunity. The spots are not guaranteed, and it's a mix of old and new. I think I saw Thomas Elliott on the sidelines there, the old Sunset player, which is probably a great addition, for as a leader. And again, I say that because I didn't see him at the beginning or in the qualifying last year. So tell me about the philosophical change that's occurred over the last few games and how you've shaped this roster.
Yeah, so we're trying to create a really competitive environment where, like I said, nobody feels safe and everyone's a little bit uncomfortable. Players know that to get in the team, they have to turn up, they have to train to the highest standard because it's one of them now that because we're doing well, everybody wants to be involved. And like I said,
it's funny how that works.
Yeah,
eh?
Exactly. But the competition is healthy, and that's a good thing. From my point of view, it doesn't matter if the player is 17 or if they're 40. If they're good enough, if they show the right attributes, if they're hungry, then there's an opportunity to get in the squad. Yes, we have a lot of young players, and I think it's important to promote the youth players. Obviously, we had some really good individual and team performances in the U23 qualifiers. So those players have earned the right to be in my thought process. But it's certainly not exclusive to just young players. Like I said, if people do the right things, and obviously the Cayman Premier League starts today, so if people play well for their club teams, again, there's an opportunity to be involved there as well.
And that is how the system works around the world.
Yeah.
You use the club teams as a gauge for your selection process, as well as showing up to practice and showing that commitment. And I think that's the biggest thing to me, at least, in covering sports here in the Cayman Islands over the last 3 years, is that the team had stayed the same for so many years, and, not winning for 9 years, something needed to change. And finally getting that first win versus USVI, first win in 9 years, really helped kind of change the culture. And winning cures everything. We've heard so many coaches say that, press conferences, winning cures everything. Now you're winning. Now you're on the cusp of getting promoted to B League and playing some real top-class countries. And from the sounds of it, it looks like people are now coming back to the program. So good job to you, Coach. I know you don't like to highlight players or give individual performances, but I'll mention them again. Obviously, it doesn't look like the moment is too big for Albertini Holness, who was the under-23 keeper. And again, it's one of the most important positions. You need... he's much like Jabari. He's kind of a quiet guy and lets his performance talk for himself. So talk about some of the key performances and some of the key, maybe positions that you feel that your team's improved over the Nations League this year.
Okay. So like I said, collectively, I think we've been very, very good. And I think, firstly, I think we have to be that. So to win games and to get in the position we're in, we have to have 11, 13, 14, 20 players that are willing to come in and stick to the game plan and put their bodies on the line and first and foremost outwork the opposition. So firstly, it's important that. But yeah, Albertini's been very, very good. He didn't play in the away game. Shakur played in the away game.
And how did you feel about his performance?
Yeah, Shakur did okay. Made a very, very good save in the first half.
But he's injured now, isn't he?
No, Shakur's okay. But again, with him and Albertini, we want it to be really competitive. We don't want one of them to feel that they're the number one goalkeeper and they're untouchable. A little bit like Sealy was for such a long time. And again, well deserved. But we want it to be a thriving, competitive environment. I think Jabari did exceptionally well at left back. Like I said, he wasn't expecting to play the game until just before. Certainly wasn't expecting to start. And I thought he came in and did a fantastic job. I thought he was aggressive. I thought he was good on the ball. He put his body on the line. So massive credit to him for that. And the other one I thought was excellent is Theron Wood. I thought he was excellent, especially in the second game. He prefers to play slightly higher. We play him in a slightly deeper role, but he was aggressive. He got tight to people. He made some good decisions on the ball. It's hard to pick individuals because really pleased with the collective. But yeah, there's a few that did very, very well.
Now with these all-important 2 games coming up again, 16th at home versus USVI, 19th away versus Barbados. That's the game, pending you beat USVI. You already beat them 2-0 away in the first game of the series. How do you see the roster shaping up? Do you see some of the veterans coming back into the mix? You mentioned Theron Wood, who's been in and out of the national team lineup. We talked about the youth infusion. How is the roster going to change, if at all, for these very 2, especially the away game? What's your thought process?
Yeah, so we had a brief discussion with staff yesterday looking at this. I think it'll be something that shapes over the next couple of weeks. I think it will be largely similar to what this one was, with maybe 1 or 2 additions. As I said, there's 1 or 2 players potentially coming back into the fold and training. And like I said, with the
and who
best
would those
thing,
be?
So Mark Ebanks is one who he's playing for Sunset this year, and he's going to come back training. So that's a great addition for us.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, he was prior to the Nations League. He was the country's only goal scorer dating back to 2015, right? So that's fantastic news.
Yeah, and obviously with the game starting this weekend, it's massively beneficial for me to have a watch of players and see how they do in their environment, and maybe there's 1 or 2 others that will catch my eye and will potentially be involved as well. So my thought process would probably be quite similar, but listen, anything can happen in football, we know that. So if people do the right things, like I said, there's an opportunity there.
So let's move forward, talk a little bit about USVI and a little bit about Barbados. So right now Barbados is 170 in the world. They were certainly higher than that before you beat them last month, or September, I believe. I can't remember off the top of my head. But now you get them again, and you're tied on record, both 3-1. And this is the winner will essentially gain promotion. The country of the top 4 of the 4 in this Group A Nations League C move on. So what do you guys have to do to win that game away? Because clearly there's a bad taste in Barbados' mouth. Not looking ahead of USVI, but let's say that you do win. It's going to come down to that game and away, which is not going to be an easy game.
No.
What do you have to do based on what you did in the first game?
Yeah, so I think, as we said in the first game against St. Martin, we lost our way a little bit in terms of we neglected what we'd done really well in the first 2 games, which was out of possession. We outworked the opposition. We battled. We put everything on the line. And I think in both of these games, we have to do that again. Like I said, I think our game is built upon that. I don't think we can be overconfident and think we can not work hard and just be good on the ball. We have to do both. So we're under no illusions that both games will be very tough, and we certainly can't underestimate USVI, because the game we had away was still a tough game, and everyone saw, well, a lot of people saw the Barbados game here, which was very, very tough. But again, I think anything can happen in football, and if you do the right things and you work hard, and we have a very good group of players, not just on the pitch but also off the pitch. They work hard, they do the right things. We give ourselves a chance. So our goal is to win both games, and we wouldn't be. We're confident we can do that. Like I said, we don't underestimate the opposition, and we know it's going to be tough, but we're confident in our own ability, and we'll fight and we'll give everything to try and win both of those games and qualify, which would be an amazing achievement for everybody.
And you have to remember, USVI beat St. Martin in St. Martin 2-1 back in September. So although you did beat them 2-0 of the Nations League opener, they can win. They have proven they can win. They only lost 1-0 to Barbados. last week, 7 days ago in Barbados. So anybody's can win on any day. So
I agree with that. I was going to say, I think in this league anybody can beat anybody. I even think Barbados will go to St. Martin, and it's not an easy game. The pitch is not the best pitch. We played in the hot sun, 3:00 kickoff, so I certainly don't think that will be an easy game for them either. And like I said, anything can happen. So we're quietly confident.
I love it. And best of luck to you, Jabari. Thanks for coming in. Head Coach Ben Pugh. CONCACAF Nations League, Cayman, sitting pretty. 2 more games, topping Group A of the C League with 3 wins and 1 loss. 2 more games next month. Make sure to go out and support. The last home game, that's the 16th versus USVI, of course, at the Trumbaden Sports Complex, and the all-important deciding game in Barbados versus Barbados. The winner will take all pending both teams win their next game. Coach Jabari, thank you for coming on this morning. I'm assuming you're going to go train right now, as all of us elite athletes do once we're done our duties to the media. So thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. More Let's Talk Sports right here on 94.9 Bob FM. Stick around. Welcome back to Let's Talk Sports Radio right here on 94.9 Bob FM, brought to you by Flow. Joining me now, his debut appearance on Let's Talk Sports Radio. He is the National Fantasy Football Analyst for Sportsnet out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, Andy McNamara. Andy, welcome to the show, my man. How are you?
Jordan, how's it going, buddy? Doing well, thank you.
Good. And pumped to have another fantasy voice on the show. You know, we've had Justin Boone from The Score. We've had some local fantasy people. It's very popular, obviously, around the world. And glad to have you on. And, you know, after Thursday Night Football, the hot topic that everybody's talking about, Patrick Mahomes, dislocated patella. Some say if he rehabs, it could be a 3-week injury and turn around with a heavy brace. But some say protect your asset long-term, surgery 7 to 9 months, come back next year. If you're a fantasy owner, we'll start there. This is a huge impact. Obviously, if you drafted Mahomes as a QB1, if you drafted Travis Kelce as a tight end 1, and of course, Tyreek Hill just got back from his own injury. There's another wide receiver 1. Are you selling or benching all of your Kansas City Chiefs assets at this point? Or what are you doing if you're a fantasy owner with the news of Patrick Mahomes' serious long-term injury?
Well, this hits real close to home because I drafted Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. So I'm doubled out of here. So I saw that yesterday. It's like, oh, man, right? Like you have the best fantasy quarterback go down and you get replaced with Matt Moore. Whew. Bit of a dip. So here's the thing. You cannot, if you're going to try to trade and panic and trade Tyreek Hill and or Travis Kelce, you're going to get pennies on the dollar. You're not going to get fair value. People know this. People can sense your desperation, right? So my thinking is you hold tight and see what the news is like with Pat Mahomes. And if it is 3 weeks and he comes back, okay, listen, that sucks that you have to go with that. Maybe they become serviceable, especially at the tight end position. It is so razor thin anyway. Who else are you going to get? Like one of my sleepers this week, Darren Fells from the Texans, who I like, doesn't have the upside of Travis Kelce, right? So it's like for those particular positions, you've got to hold. And there's so much talent. Maybe they find creative ways. Do not panic and start trading or benching them. Play as is.
Good point. And just from a football perspective, you know, this has huge implications. You know, Pat Mahomes is the reigning MVP. He's a mobile quarterback. He has a skill set that we had never seen before. And long term, you know, this may affect his mobility as a football fan and a sports, media professional. You hate to see a guy like Pat Mahomes go down because obviously we don't know the full extent of his injury right now. But from an actual football perspective, the Chiefs, what do they do? Where do they go here with Matt Moore? He's not really known as a high-level backup or a high-level player. He had a good run maybe 3 years ago with the Dolphins, keeping them in contention or afloat. But, you know, as a football fan, where do the Chiefs as a franchise go? They have a big decision to make, yes?
Well, sure, absolutely they do. And I think out of all this, probably the value goes up for the Chiefs running back field, right? The committee is really where I think the fantasy value, you look at that, it's awful. Just as you said, from the football side of things, it's terrible to see that. It just seems to me, once again, the New England Patriots catch a break. Because who is going to stop them? It's going to be the Chiefs. Well, who's going to stop them now? Pat Mahomes is out for a longer period of time or isn't 100%. It just seems like, once again, the red carpet is rolled out to the Super Bowl for the New England Patriots. So that's that's one downside of it. But when you look at as far as like the fantasy implications for the Chiefs, I think really now we have to see, and we're not going to know this for next week. We're not going to know right away. We're going to have to see how it plays out. Who benefits? Is it Damian Williams? Is it LaShawn McCoy? Is it Darrell Williams? Does Darwin Thompson at some point come back? Like where does that running back field come into it? Does somebody take the lead? Is it used more often? Because I would have to think, if I'm Andy Reid, I do not want to have Matt Moore throwing the ball 40 times. You're going to have to rely on that backfield more. I think that's going to be a very interesting story to follow.
All right, let's jump into your starts of the week. You already mentioned Darren Fells, tight end for Houston, which is a revelation, seeing as they finally discovered that they can throw to the tight end position, which is always nice. One of the things that's been a trend, if you're in a redraft or any sort of league, is right out the get-go, we're in week 7 here, there's a few teams that have really you want to target if you have offensive skill players playing against them. And those would be the Dolphins, who are essentially not coming out and saying it, but they're pretty bad and possibly tanking. You've got Washington, who's in disarray. And although they are trying, the Falcons are giving up a ton of points. So if you're on the flip side of that, let me ask you, are you firing up all your Bills, all your San Francisco 49ers? Give me your opinion on who your best starts are this week.
Yeah, follow the money, folks, okay? And especially for DFS, if you're popping in, let's say, your DraftKings lineup, too. You want to find those great matchups on a week-to-week basis. And you follow the garbage, really, right? So the Dolphins, you have players openly asking to be traded. That's a disaster. So, absolutely. I think the Bills, Josh Allen, to me right now, when healthy, is a must-start fantasy quarterback regardless of the opponent, just because he gives that extra value with his legs and has really impressed me and stepped up in that regard. The only time I looked at a Miami Dolphin really being relevant fantasy-wise to go in the other direction, because another question we get a lot is, okay, out of these bad teams, is there anybody you like? Was last week with Kenyon Drake versus the Redskins, and it was just okay. So, yeah, I'm firing up the Bills. Keep an eye on John Brown, of course, if he's going to play. Devin Singletary is back. He's practicing in full. I am lighting him up. Slide him right in. I know Frank Gore can be a bit of a vulture from time to time, but I think Singletary is going to be back in a big way. Another team we look at, too, that you want to look to exploit is the Cincinnati Bengals. I think it could be a nice week for maybe Minshew Mania resurging a little bit after a down week as well.
As well, DJ Chark, 30 receptions, over 500 yards, and 5 touchdowns so far. He's looking like Gardner. He's looking at Gardner Minshew's number one target. And the other team that I wanted to mention was the Los Angeles Rams. 3 straight losses. Of course, 2 at home. They make the big trade. They give up the farm for Jalen Ramsey in what some pundits are saying was a little bit of a miscalculation of who's he going to cover in a very, weak receiving corps in the NFC. Regardless, the Rams need a win. And is this a get-right week for the Rams on the road against a very weak and ineffective Atlanta Falcons defense? Are we lighting up the Brandon Cooks, the Robert Woods? I mean, Cooper Kupp is obviously a wide receiver 1 at this point. But tell me what you think. And, of course, Gurley, there's no 100% whether he's playing this week. You've got Malcolm Brown. Everyone's waiting for Darrell Henderson to get his fair share. What do you think of the Rams? Is this a get-right week for them?
Well, if it was at home, I'd say yes. They're a different team on the road, and I saw them in person. I'm a big Cleveland Browns fan, and I saw them in the Sunday Nighter live and in Cleveland, and it's a different looking team. And that offense is not nearly as prolific as we know overall, but on the road, just a different look. I think a lot of it comes down to that Todd Gurley is not being used for health reasons, for load management reasons, whatever the case might be, as before, and it's really changed the offense. So to me, listen, if you don't have a better option, you pop in Cooks and Woods, sure, but they're very much up and down. I think the only surefire starter fantasy-wise is Cooper Kupp, and that's whether they're on the road or not. So I think the Rams win the game, but I'm picturing a low scoring, maybe in the teens, and not an overly aggressive fantasy day for anybody outside of Cooper Kupp.
And that's a real disappointment because there's a lot of people that invested a lot in the Los Angeles Rams. I know myself, I'm a Brandon Cooks owner. And, even the defense was but defense is obviously vary a little bit, especially though, if you thought Jared Goff was anything fantasy relevant, single digits, like 2 points in PPR last week. That's an embarrassment. But let's talk about your sits, Andy. I think there's certainly a lot of things to be desired. A lot of players. I know the Titans offense has been a huge dud, off the top of my head. But let me ask you, who are your big sits this week?
If you have the possibility to do it, and you might not, if your wide receiver core is thin, I have a pretty deep wide receiver group on my fantasy team, and I'm choosing to sit Tyler Boyd. Okay, I know it's the starter, right? I know that's something where you look at it and it's like, okay, well, is that really the best look at that level? And if you have other options, I think Tyler Boyd could be, at least in DFS, do not pay up for Tyler Boyd. Maybe you have to in your season long. I would be more inclined to maybe go an Auden Tate type of look, cheaper in DFS, and still might be available on your waiver wire. So that's someone I'm gonna sit down. I'm also gonna sit Frank Gore against Miami. Like I said, Devin Singletary, I think it's just going to be worked right back in. And Gore can get touches as well, but that's the back in Buffalo to go with. So I think when you look at those kind of more either expensive players that are going to be going up against the Miamis and that type of thing when it comes to Buffalo, that's where you're going to look to maybe take a bit of a seat. And again, even without Ramsey, that Jacksonville defense is still very good. Andy Dalton, I actually like Andy Dalton overall as kind of that garbage, especially early in the season, garbage fantasy point guy. But I don't think this is the week for that. So I would consider, especially in DFS, maybe taking a pass on some of those guys.
Let's touch a little bit on tight ends. Obviously, we talked a little bit about it's becoming a little bit of a graveyard, pretty thin. I think this week, a great start. Obviously, if you have him, he's probably a high pick. If you took him in redraft, is of course George Kittle. He's probably going to cost you a pretty penny in DFS, but starting to put up the numbers. Almost, he is like a wide receiver one if you have him at tight end. So you're starting to get good numbers. What are some tight ends you're looking at? Of course, you have even Darren Waller, away on the road in Lambeau against Green Bay, of course, Oakland. Who are some tight ends that you like? You mentioned Darren Fells earlier from the Giants. With that Giants offense not looking too bad. Of course, I'm not sure if Saquon's going to start this week or he's coming back next week, but who do you like at the tight end position? Who don't you like?
Right, and Darren Waller has been phenomenal all year long now. This is someone you got to track. He was limited at practice Thursday with a foot issue, so keep an eye on that. Otherwise, I'd say you definitely want to pop him in there. Evan Ingram, back from injury against the Arizona Cardinals, who are ranked dead last in the league when it comes to giving up fantasy points to tight ends. So there should be a nice exploitable matchup there. Listen, I tried ignoring him as long as possible. You can't ignore Austin Hooper anymore, folks. You can't. We talk about the Falcons being real bad. Austin Hooper has become the go-to guy. He's put up, I'm just looking now, 28.7 fantasy points PPR, 13.6, 25, 24.6. Like the guy has just become Matt Ryan's absolute go-to. Here's a general strategy I'm telling people to avoid. The Baltimore Ravens tight end situation. I know everybody's liking Mark Andrews, and he has put up hot and cold numbers. He goes teens, he goes single digits, he goes back to the teens. There are too many tight ends there. There are too many tight ends to get fed. And then with Lamar Jackson, you don't know if he's going to be running or handing off the ball. That is a situation I try to avoid, the Baltimore Ravens tight end situation. So I think there, you got to look at Hunter Henry as well, right? He's back at a huge week. Is it going to be a 30-plus fantasy point day against the Titans defense? Probably not. But there's another area you want to look. The Colts are another kind of tweener one, right? Like Eric Ebron, he is questionable. So if he does not start, then you can slot in Doyle. But, I'm not loving Jimmy Graham. He hasn't done squat. So it gets real thin real quick at the tight end position, especially if you're doing Sunday slated games and Travis Kelce's already played.
Yeah, Austin Hooper, number one tight end in half-point PPR. Mark Andrews, definitely a touchdown-dependent tight end, and I 100% agree. A few too mouths to feed at that position in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And Darren Waller, multi-year extension earlier this week. So John Gruden definitely believing, and a good story as well, coming back from substance abuse and a few years out of the league. And, of course, I just think George Kittle's going to feast against that Washington. Even though it's in Washington, I think Washington is dead and done. They can't do anything. So, all right, last but not least, give me your deep sleepers. I know you're a busy guy. If there's any other nuggets you got, throw them out now. You get the final word, Andy.
Nice. Well, thank you. Yeah, and remember, folks, Kittle nursing a groin injury. That looks like he will play. But, again, whenever you just make sure, just in general, make sure, set your lineup. Before you finalize those lines, keep track. Because with little injuries, can pop up, right? So you got to make sure you keep an eye on that. That's always my thing. People are like, oh, I played this guy. You got to keep track of it. A guy like this week, I know it's against New England, so especially, listen, DFS, you're looking for differential points. Give me Jamison Crowder of the Jets. Okay, just over 50% owned in Yahoo League. A lot of people have forgotten about him or dropped him because of the Jets situation. The Jets aren't very good, and you're going up against New England. But this is the safety valve for Sam Darnold. Robbie Anderson, not 100% either. So you look at Jamison Crowder, especially PPR, I probably wouldn't go with him in any other format. Standard, certainly not. But Jamison Crowder is somebody I think you can get in there. Also track Alan Lazard. If when you look at if Adams or Geronimo Allison is out or limited, Lazard's the guy who pops. That's when you really want to. I don't like chasing after big one-off weeks, but Lazard could be somebody, especially if one of those receivers misses times or is severely limited, that Rodgers has had an instant chemistry with, so you got to keep an eye there. And as we said before, Darren Fells, I think, is a nice slot in for the Texans.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a Jets fan myself. The two games that Jamison Crowder has played with Sam Darnold, he's got a combined 26 targets, 17 in week 1 and 9 last week, so he certainly likes the underneath slot throws there. Passing marks, top grades for you, Andy. Great job. That's the National Fantasy Football reporter and analyst for Sportsnet out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, Andy McNamara. Andy, how about a few weeks we hit you up and we do this one more time? Sound good?
Oh, Jordan, anytime, brother. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be on.
Absolutely. And more Let's Talk Sports Radio right here on 94.9 Bob FM. Stick around. Welcome back to Let's Talk Sports Radio right here on 94.9 Bob FM. Joining me now directly from Washington, D.C., fresh off the franchise's first WNBA title. Director of Player Development for the Washington Mystics, Sefu Bernard. Welcome to the show and congratulations, Sefu. How are you?
I'm real well. Thanks for having me on the show, Jordan.
So let's talk about the team's run. Obviously, why don't we tee it up a little bit? So you're the Director of Player Development for this team. 10 appearances in the playoffs since the inception in 1998. Again, as mentioned, it's the franchise's first title. Tell the listeners a little bit about how long you've been with the team and how this season came to be and this run towards the franchise's first title.
Yeah, this is my 5th year with the team. It's been an absolute joy, and it's been a journey getting here. I think sometimes people kind of see the tip of the iceberg and they see the championship, but it took a lot of work to get to this point. It definitely wasn't a straight line. You know, we say success isn't linear. We've had a lot of roadblocks, bang-ups and hang-ups and detours and injuries that have derailed us along the way, and we had to fight hard for our culture to be here and get the buy-in and get the right people with us on the bus to get to this point. The championship that we won last week was the first for the franchise, as you noted. We had a great series that went to the 5th and final game in a best of 5 versus the Connecticut Sun. And, you know, like all great competitive affairs, you know, you've just got two teams that are going back and forth. So the game was decided in the last quarter. And it was a testament to our players just willing themselves to victory. We lost last year's in the finals, as you touched on, and to be able to come back, you know, I like to phrase it, being able to go from good to good is really tough. And that's what we had done. And so our theme this year was run it back, and we did just that, and had to fight hard to earn it, but we've done it, so we're thrilled.
Tell me a little bit about, you know, this team in this league. You've been in this league 5 years, and, you know, you've obviously seen a lot of great basketball players come and go. For this franchise to win its first title, what was the biggest difference, you know, in the 5 years with this team? You talked a little bit about getting the right players, the buy-in and things like that. You know, what for you, you know, as a sports professional, what was the biggest change in the team since you've been with the franchise now, obviously culminating in its first title?
You know, I think it's the growth that needs to take place. You know, there's no skipping of steps. And, you know, losing last year was a reminder of that. The level of focus, how dialed in you have to be, at this level, with the caliber of player that you find in the W, the margin for error is so small. The preparation that needs to take place is so small. History will remember the Washington Mystics as being the WNBA champions, world champions in 2019, but how close it was for us in Connecticut Sun would be the equivalent of, Usain Bolt winning a 100-meter sprint. We're talking about fractions of seconds that separate first and second. And that's credit to the caliber of player that's there. And so you gotta go through some stuff to get to the thing that you really want. And we had to go through that process. When Coach Mike Tebow is, he's the winningest coach in the league's history, and been in the league for, I believe it's 17 years now. He's been to the finals, and there was a big gap between the last time he gets to the finals. And so when you're dealing with young players, which we had when I first came on, there's this assumption that the process will be fluid. We put in the work, we'll get the results. And that's just not how the game works. You've got to grow, and you've got to go through some things. And that's what we did. We had some young players. We had some success. We made the playoffs. And then the following year, we didn't make the playoffs. And then we had to battle back. But as you're getting better, so are other teams. And so the water level has risen, and that's what's taking place. There's some really good teams who are all in a position to win a championship. And that was one of the things, even as we made it to the finals last year, we got swept by the Seattle Storm. And although our theme, as I touched on, was run it back, nobody's going to hand it to you. Our semifinals, we played against the Las Vegas Aces, and they gave us a run for our money. They've got, a 6'8" post in Liz Cambage from Australia, and, future All-Star. She is an All-Star, but she's an Asia Wilson, a 6'5" post who's multi-skilled. She's the future of the league. With a front line like that, you got to fight your way through, and there's no let up in them as well. So that going through that process of learning how to win and learning how to anchor down and put teams away was what we needed.
Yeah, it must have been nice for Coach T. Of course, that's his former team, wasn't it? The Connecticut Sun. That was his former team that he coached. And, of course, you finished first in the Eastern Conference. Of course, WNBA, 34-game season with the Connecticut Sun second. Tell me a little bit about this league because, I'm not, here in Cayman or, in the Caribbean. Maybe they're still learning about the WNBA. As being a 34-game season, not including the playoffs, you have a lot of basketball players that this is for women's basketball, this is a part of what they do. But at the same time, you have a large collection of these players will go off to Australia or another league once this league's over and go play in another league. Where do you see the league's biggest, improvements and leaps, and where would you like to see, the WNBA go now that you've been with the league for 5 years as it relates to growth and, visibility around the world?
Interesting question you're asking. For those who don't know, as you touched on, the WNBA is the sister league to the NBA. It is at its peak in terms of the caliber and quality of play, and what we're witnessing now is women's basketball at its best. The WNBA is the best women's basketball professional league in the world. But what most people don't know, as you alluded to, is being a women's professional athlete is the hardest thing. I say it humbly and not to minimize the challenges of being involved or to being a men's pro basketball player. I spent 10 years working in the NBA. It's my 20th year in pro sports. But the women's season, the life of a women's pro basketball year is more challenging. They spend 6 months, give or take, with us in the WNBA. And, for instance, our players, we finished up last week Thursday, and by Saturday, 2 of our players who play overseas were on a flight back reporting to their teams. One plays in Russia, the other plays in France. By Monday, Tuesday, the others are hopping on a plane. They've got commitments, Korea. We've got others going to China, some in Australia. And so there's no let up. They flip from our season, they go to their overseas commitment, and then once they're done there, they report right back to us. And we have several who have national team commitments. So, dropped right on top of that in the midst of those seasons at times, they've got to report to the national teams, and they get to represent their countries. But with that, what that means is they're playing 11, maybe more 11 months out of the year. So there isn't a window for recovery, both physically, mentally. There's little time for family. Their lion's share of them are away from their homes for a large percent of the year. So that presents challenges. And so, this year is an interesting year for us in the WNBA. We've got a collective bargaining agreement coming up, which will have an impact on salaries and a lot of discussions about future earnings and the marketability of the league and how to grow the game. So that's something that everybody's going to have a key eye on. How do we support these women, and how do we grow the league?
And I think one way, which you might agree with as a fellow Canadian, is to perhaps put a WNBA team in Toronto. The basketball's never been more popular, of course, with our beloved, I'm speaking on behalf of you for here, our beloved Toronto Raptors winning the first NBA title. And, of course, the Canadian Elite Basketball League just finishing its inaugural season, and being a part of the FIBA Americas and being an arm of Canada basketball. What chatter have you heard, if any, about bringing the WNBA to Canada?
Well, there's a lot of speculation about it. I think it would be a great thing for the city, for the country. I think they're hungry as a nation. I spent almost 10 years working the national teams in Canada, specifically with the women. And the quality of player, both men and women, but just speaking since we're talking women's basketball, is as well at its highest. There's a number of Canadians who are in the WNBA who are consistently showing up on rosters and in training camps. I think basketball is at its peak, both because of the success of the Raptors, and I'm with you. I'm proud of that team, proud of the country. I worked for the Raptors for 8 years. It's a thrilling thing, and it would be great. Toronto, I think, would be the place to do it. They've got the infrastructure and the know-how to do it, especially if there were a tie-in with Maple Leaf Sports. I think there's a lot of things that need to happen first. As you know, there was some speculation from a group that wanted to get things going. I felt it was a little premature, especially the timelines. You can't just raise your hand and say, "Hey, I'm going to open up a franchise." There are a lot of pieces that need to move for that to happen first. But I am hopeful that it happens, and when it does, I'll be the first one applauding it all. It would be exciting, and definitely that market could sustain it.
Absolutely. And I mean, there are 4 Canadians in the WNBA right now. So, there you go. There's a third of the roster. Let me ask you this. You obviously spend much of your time in the Caribbean when you're not obligated to direct the Washington Mystics. What about the opportunities for the Caribbean? When I had the NBA Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum on a few months ago, he talked about the Caribbean being a vital market and growing in the Caribbean through small grassroots programs and kind of developing it from there. Are there opportunities? I don't think there is a ratio rule in WNBA, much like there is the Elite Basketball League, where it's 70% Canadian. What is the growth opportunities? Does the WNBA look to the Caribbean, like for women that are looking to make basketball a career? Obviously, with it being a 12-team league and a 34-game season in that small window, you're going to have the best of the best, being the top women's basketball league, arguably in the world. What advice do you have for women in the Caribbean looking to make the leap to professional basketball, for example?
Yeah, the WNBA has no restrictions whatsoever. I mean, our model is just like the NBA. We're turning every stone to discover players that are skilled enough to compete at our level. It is the best of the best, and it's competitive. I think we've got a great model, ambassador for what is possible for women's players coming out of the Caribbean in John Quill Jones, who plays for the Connecticut Sun. She's a fantastic talent and a great kid, and can be a great ambassador for kids who aspire to play at this level. Similarly on the men's side, Buddy Hield, who's also from the Bahamas.
DeAndre Ayton.
DeAndre Ayton, yes, as well. Bahamian as well. I mean, and what's exciting to me, there are players who have either been in the NBA with roots to the Caribbean, whether it be Jamaica or other islands who still are, or are descendants of. We've got. There's the path is there, or at least there are people who are beacons of what could be. I know John Quell and Buddy specifically are trying to do more in their mother island to create paths for other kids. I think the athletic base is here in the Caribbean without a doubt, and so what the opportunity is, as Mark Tatum touched on, is to help support the coaches, the infrastructure, to help create access to equipment and access to the opportunity to play. If we can do more of that at the grassroots level to build a bigger pool of kids, that will start to ignite and create new possibilities. And then I think there's more to be done in terms of supporting and educating up parents in terms of how sport can become a tool to create a pathway both for education and what could be, and also for kids to pursue new possibilities through whether it be basketball and other sport at the post-secondary level. So there's a lot that can be done. And there are a lot of great people who are doing things currently. In Cayman Islands Basketball Association, Coach Boot, et cetera, are doing some great things. On my end, I'm launching a new initiative called eeek Basketball, and there as well to help support things that are going on there. People like Mark Tatum has touched on he's got a direct tie into the Cayman Islands, Brack. Yeah, Bracker through and through.
Uh-huh.
So there are a lot of people who are seeing the opportunity, and not just the opportunity, but have a vested interest in using sport to have a positive impact on kids and create some pathways.
Absolutely. It's been said time and time again by the leaders in all sports around the world. What's a better community builder than sports? And here at Cayman, it plays a big role. Just like you, Sefu, great job, Director of Player Development for the WNBA champion. How's that sound? Washington Mystics. Sefu, let's catch up when you get back on the rock. Thank you, as always, for being very generous with your time.
Absolute pleasure. It sounds sweet. You can say it as many times as possible.
I'll say it every week.
Back in home in Cayman.
Just get me a little swag. I'm very easily swayed. I can keep reminding people on the show if you want. So.
I got you.